Hello there guys, it's Michael here, and in this video I'm going to give you 5 tips that you can use to learn songs easier. Now if you're a total beginner, this is going to be one of the best videos you watch, as we can help you circumvent getting really frustrated with learning songs and pretty much getting stuck. If you're an intermediate or an advanced level player, hopefully you're going to learn a few things which will help you accelerate the process of learning and have a much easier time learning songs. Let's get into it. So tip number 1 when it comes time to learn songs is to break the song down into the different sections. More often than not, a 3.5 minute song may only be about 30 seconds of different music, especially if you're talking about pop music and the top 40 stuff here on the radio. More often than not, the chord progression is the same 4 chords repeated over and over. If you get good at those same 4 chords, then what you can do is basically learn one section and just copy, paste, drag and drop what you've learned. Now, some of the more interesting songs are going to be A-B sections, and once again, basically a 3.5 minute pop song is probably going to be 30 seconds to 45 seconds of music. Now yes, there might be different melodies you have to put over the top, guitar solos, certain riffs, 100% there's going to be things like that. But if you break them down into identifiable sections, go, hey, for this song, even though it's 3.5 minutes, I have to learn the intro, which is the same as the chorus, I have to learn the riff, and then of course the verse has a slightly different chord progression. You might only need to actually learn 4 different things in order to play that song. Now that's going to make it way less intimidating when you think about learning a particular song, and it's also going to allow you to break it down and make it more manageable. For example, in the first day of learning a song, I'm just going to focus on part 1. The second day, part 2. Third day, part 3, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. Song learning tip number 2 is practice the transitions between sections. Now, as I alluded to in the previous video, you can learn the verse, you can learn the chorus, but what is going to happen, because when you learnt the verse, you learnt bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, bar 4, and that's where your brain switched off and went back to the start. Your brain is going to see that as one little chunk, and when you learn the chorus, for example, it's going to see that as another chunk. What is very common is you play the first chunk, and then you stop and think, and then you play the second chunk, but you're always going to pause to think. Now, you play how you practice. So if you practice like that and learn like that, when you go to play, it's going to come out exactly like that. And your music is always going to have that pause, which really takes away from the fluidity of the song. What you need to do is practice the transitions. So for example, you might practice going from the last chord in the verse to the first chord in the chorus, or the end of riff number 1 into riff number 2. Gradually, what you do is take those 2 bars that are adjacent to each other and then expand it back a bit. And then expand it back a bit. I'm probably going the wrong way on the camera. Hopefully you get the analogy that I'm making. And essentially what happens, you work your way until you have got the whole section down, or the transition between sections. But essentially work on the transitions and create that mental link where there is no pause. And then after enough repetition, your brain will go on autopilot and just play both sections seamlessly. Our third tip for learning songs is to sing the melodies and to clap the rhythms. Now this all comes down to the fact that if you're just trying to wing something and you don't really know the song that well, then you have no hope of bringing it to life on the instruments. If you can't sing it, if you can't hum it, if you can't clap along to the rhythm, then you're not going to be able to do it on the guitar. It's simply not going to work. So if you are trying to play a melody, sing it as you learn it, sing it as you play it, and that's going to help you better connect what's happening up here to what's coming out of your fingers on the instrument. It's going to be very powerful to practice that way. Likewise, if you're learning a strumming pattern, make sure you can clap the rhythm. If you're learning how to play a riff, make sure you can clap the rhythm, and maybe even clap the rhythm and sing the melody or the tab numbers that you're playing. You're doing the Smoke on the Water, you should be able to go. And then add the singing. 035, 0365, 035, 30. That's a simplified version I normally do with my kids, so don't jump on my back about that, and I'll be eating the actual one in the recording there. However, if you can't do that, if you can't clap it and sing at the same time, you're going to have a much harder time actually playing it on guitar. So sing it, clap it, make sure you can do that without the instrument in your hand first, then pick up your guitar and go to town on it. Song learning tip number 4 is to actively listen to the song that you're trying to learn. Now, you might think you listen to a song because it's your favorite song and you listen to it dozens of times, but if you're listening to it as you drive somewhere, while you're going for a jog, as you're playing video games, whatever it happens to be, then you're not really actively listening to it. And there's going to be a whole bunch of things in that song you don't actually listen. And I think actively listening to things is kind of like a lost, not art if you will, but just something that doesn't happen anymore. I remember when I was younger, I would just put on a CD, I'd lay on my bed and I'd just listen to it and be in awe of the guitar playing. Whereas even myself now, when I get brand new CDs, I set aside time to listen to them. But often if I'm playing a game or I'm at the gym working out, I've got my music going because that's what I like. But when you listen to something passively, it's not sinking into your long-term memory because your brain isn't processing it properly. It's focusing on what's going on the road or lifting weights. What you should do if you're learning a song is listen to it at least once, if not a couple of times, and just let it set in, let it marinate so that you start noticing things. You'll notice that, oh yeah, it goes verse, chorus, guitar solo, chorus. You'll start seeing the form. You'll also pay more attention to what the guitars are doing. Oh, you know what? I can actually hear that there's more than one guitar. That's why it's actually tricky to play, because there's probably two guitars combined together to do this part. When you actively listen, you will start also going, hey, this tab that I found on Ultimate Guitar doesn't quite match up with what's there. And that's another source of frustration, is essentially making sure that you've got good quality things to work with there. So when it comes to listening, make sure you actively listen to the song, you let it sink into your head, and that's going to make tip number 3, singing along to it, and of course clapping the rhythms, so much easier, and as a consequence, learning the song in its entirety will be easier too. Guitar tip number 5 is to know when to move on. Now, there has never been a better time to learn how to play guitar, and there has never been such a wealth of learning resources and materials available to you. The problem as a beginner is you don't know the difference between what is good content and what is bad content. And if you bite off more than you can chew and you try and learn a Dream Theater song when you've only been playing guitar for a couple of weeks, then you are in for a bad time. So if you are getting frustrated, know when it's time to move on. And there's nothing wrong with learning the chords to a song and coming back later to learn the riff or the guitar solos. That's totally fine. If you're finding that learning this song just isn't working, you're getting frustrated, you're not seeing any progress, then stop for that practice session. Come back to it tomorrow when you're feeling fresh. If you're still hitting that wall, you can't break through it, you can't see the improvement, then it just might be too difficult a song for you, and there's nothing wrong with that. What you hear on the recording may be a product of at least a couple of years, if not a couple of decades of hard work by the recording artist. If you're a beginner guitar player, it's not a fair comparison for you to try and keep up with what you hear on the recording when you've only been playing for a couple of months, when it takes a couple of years to develop certain skills. So if you, again, I've said it a couple of times, if you're frustrated, if you hit a wall, move on to something else, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised. Come back to it in a couple of months, and even though you might feel like you haven't really progressed all that much, if you go and try something which you haven't done for 6 months, a year, however long, and you absolutely nail it, or you sight read it, or it's just absolutely way easier for you to play, you'll be so pleased with your progress and go, oh yeah, you know what, I have improved. It's such a great feeling there. Now guys, this was meant to be 5 tips, but I realized upon recording that there is one really important tip for learning songs that I couldn't leave out, and that is to make sure you're using really great source material. Now, I really love going to ultimateguitar.com and basically just looking up tabs or chord progressions for songs that I want to learn and then trying to play them. My students will also come to me with internet tabs they've printed out, and the first thing I do is point out all the mistakes. Now, when you're a bit more experienced, you can go, oh yeah, that's not how it is, or wrong key, or this is just blatantly wrong. But when you're a total beginner, you don't really know, and because you can't read the music, you can't understand the rhythms, don't really know how to put it together, you're just looking at something on a page, listening to something and pulling your hair out because you can't make that translate to that. Great example of this, if you go to Knock on Heaven's Door, there's a song which has 15,000 gold star rating there, highest rating Knock on Heaven's Door. The strumming pattern they give you is incorrect and there's a mistake in the first bar. Yet 15,000 guitar players have uploaded that to be the number 1. This is why it's dangerous to teach yourself, because you don't know any better. Another example is when I was 17, I transcribed a song, I put it on Ultimate Guitar. The song was No Second Prize by Jimmy Barnes. I transcribed it. It is the highest rated version. There are people saying, hey man, cool, thanks for that. It is riddled with mistakes. I didn't know any better, my ear wasn't all that developed, but people are basically upvoting that with 5 stars. So basically my recommendation is if you can support the artist by buying their tabs or an official book, that's really, really helpful. If you can get a video or a course where they're actually demonstrating how to play your song, that does help the artist. The closer you can get to the source, the better that it is. Whenever you're paying for resources, they are generally high quality. It's not always the case. I've got a couple of books from a major publication over the year which is just blatantly wrong, or transcribed by a piano player and played as a piano player would play it rather than a guitar player. So you're never going to be 100% safe. However, what I recommend is that you always source the highest quality things you can, and that's going to lead to you being a lot less frustrated and a lot more accurate in what you're trying to play. So guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope that you found these tips really helpful. If you have, I'd appreciate a like. And if you want to keep up to date with more video content like this, make sure you subscribe. I've also got a link to my blog down below, so in these videos I try and keep them short and concise. If you would like to read longer form articles, then there's a wealth of free lessons on my website there. So check it out, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.